I can see why you've been referred to as a mix of Solomon, Confucius, and who was it? Yoda. Like, I already feel like we just wrap up right there. We're done. Yeah.
Well, it either has your listeners leaning into the conversation or running for the hills. I'm not sure which, but
or doing that sort of Stan Laurel type scratching of the head.
You're listening to the Occupational Philosophers with Simon Banks and John Rice.
Hello and welcome to the Occupational Philosophers, a not-so-serious business podcast that mashes up the world of creativity, curiosity, and a dash of philosophy. Each and every episode, I'm joined by my co-host and co-producer, John Rice, over in the UK. Good morning to you, John. What's caught your curious eye this week?
Well, I don't know when this will quite get out as a published episode, but we are at this moment in the midst of the World Cup, so clearly that's catching my curious eye, and we'll find out later in the show as to why that's particularly pertinent to our guest in terms of location. But I was taken by various funny stories. Scotland clearing up the park as they left after their defeat from Brazil in a very orderly fashion. But I love the one of Norway, who've taken to doing Norwegian sort of Viking galley rowing as part of their thing in the stadium. And they do a big and they pull the oars back in unison. So it's like a Mexican wave, but it's a Norwegian row. And they did it on an escalator, which I thought was genius. So as you see them, they're advancing upwards as they go. I mean, Lord knows what the guy in the health and safety high-vis jacket was thinking at the time in the shopping centre, but it looks brilliant. I'll put the link in the show notes. So, yeah, that caught my curious eye, just the fun stuff that happens around the football. How about you?
It was a question. My eldest son, he said to me, Dad, what's your favourite work of art ever? And I was stumped a little bit by that. So that's a big question. What's the meaning of life? And so he's come back to me a few times. Well, what is it? What is it? And how do you decide that? So I went with an artwork, and it was Botticelli's Birth of Venus. When I was traveling around Europe, I saw that. And this is after I used to be a lecturer at the National Gallery of England. So I gave talks on these amazing artworks. But I saw that and I started to cry. So I thought, well, that's the one that's moved me the most. And whether it's not my favorite. So then I thought, is there a better question? What's the artwork? Could be film, sculpture, poem, writing that's moved you the most. And I thought, well, maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, that's a really
rather
nice
than
question.
your favorite. So yeah, I just liked it. It made me think, and also that my son is asking me about art, which is quite unusual.
Yeah,
so he thought I was a weirdo.
That's a promising sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
And is it just, we have to say at this point, obviously, and I'm going to show my slight sort of layman's understanding of sort of fine art or whatever. Is Botticelli's Venus where she stood on the shell?
Yes, exactly that.
Or is that something different?
No, that's it. Yeah,
it is that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I just remember it being animated by a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, same one.
Which is probably why I remember.
Yeah, same one.
Yeah, okay, great.
I don't know, but I just stood in front of it. It was so beautiful. Something shifted inside me, and I've never had it before. Maybe it was the Monty Python. And it was just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I say I couldn't watch that in a gallery because I'd be expecting it to move.
Haha. Well, there you go. Yeah.
I'd be stood there going, come on, when does the animation start? Anyway, right.
John, we have a guest this week, which is always a wonderful thing. So who is the curious cat we have?
I know I say this every time, Simon, but I really am excited with today's guest. This is genuinely a curious cat on every measure. He is an innovation advisor who works, writes and guides at the nexus, which is a great word, of creativity, entrepreneurship, leadership and great questions. He's the author of 3 previous award-winning books, A Deliberate Pause, The Language of Man and Rebel Leadership, and has just released his latest book, Great Question, The Art of the Ask, brackets, and Getting More of What You Really Want, which I think is a nice teaser. As a founder and president of Lighthouse Consulting for more than 3 decades, he's been working with and guiding organizations and their leaders through uncertainty, change, and growth. My favorite testimonial highlights his approach, which is, it's like talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi, Confucius, and King Solomon all rolled into one.
That's a tattoo,
and I
isn't
hope he's
it?
paid someone. It's beyond brilliant.
Yeah.
As a popular columnist, he's contributed to Inc. magazine, Smart Brief on leadership, the Creativity Post, as well as contributing columns for publications including Fast Company and the Chicago Tribune. He's a much sought-after keynote speaker, got a really unique ability, brings his audience into the story and helps them craft and think about their own stories. He is a proud graduate of Stanford University and Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, and a former adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Georgetown University, McDonough School of Business, and of leadership at the University of Maryland's Smith School of Business. And finally, as if that wasn't enough, in 2021, he was named a US Fulbright Scholar, which is a real rarity for non-academic professionals. So, I'd like you to welcome to the Occupational Philosophers a man who has secretly discovered a rip in the fabric of time and space, and with it, the ability to live a 28-hour day in a 9-day week, which is why he gets so much done. It's Larry Robertson.
Hey, Larry.
Hello, Larry.
Welcome.
Thank you for that intro. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel very welcome. And I love that you picked Jackie Leiden's quote because it just cracks me up every time I hear it. She's an absolute character, as I know you know from reading the book. She's fantastic.
No, I was thinking, imagine if that was because you thought that's how you looked, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Confucius, and King Solomon. Like,
yeah, I that would be very confusing and probably unattractive. But
that's where my shallow brain went to.
And I'm going to make a guess here, Larry. I think you were most pleased about Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Boy, wouldn't you? I mean, if only that were true, that I reflected some of that. You bet. I'm absolutely more tied to that.
Complete with lightsaber and the ability to fight Darth Vader on the Death Star. But apart
There
from
you
that,
go.
yeah, I mean, Confucius is good.
Yeah. But I still would lean for Obi-Wan, except the dying part.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Right. Look, Larry, it goes without saying, having shared our curiosity, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I'll tell you, there's the catching your eye, and I'll get to that in a second. But I love that you've already asked each other that because it caught my ear. Each of the things you talked about immediately made me think of something in that same zone, which I just love that. For me, it's been kind of strange. It has been yellow finches. So we have lots of birds in our area. Most of them are pretty plain, but these yellow finches that we have, and we see them occasionally, are this bright, brilliant, almost fluorescent yellow. And they're very small, so it's not like a larger bird, a raptor or something like that, that can protect itself. So I've not only been drawn to the color, but why is this so? Why do they have this jumping back and forth between the advantages that might come with it, but also the disadvantages of being the only standout in the crowd where everybody is on one end of prey or victim. So yeah, the yellow finches have just been running through my head, wondering how did evolution decide to create this, at least right here?
Yes. Yeah, you're right there. I hadn't thought of that because you would think that would make them, sort of very visible to a prey.
Absolutely.
And therefore you go, well, that's not going to work, is it? I mean, yeah.
And we do have a lot of raptors in the area that I live in, eagles and hawks and falcons and so on. So
okay, not velociraptors, you mean?
No, exactly.
Birds of prey.
But that bright yellow says dinner bell to me.
It's a high,
apparently they must have other advantages,
vest, isn't it? Like, hey guys, here,
yes.
Food, tasty.
I'm over here.
And did you find anything out? Did you research any more, or have you that's a question you're pondering?
I often do that. I often look it up and say, okay, how can I file away some answers, hopefully more than one on that. But I decided this time to not do that right away, to see if I could think of more than the obvious in terms of the advantages or disadvantages, or what would you have to compensate by having if you had those colors that made you a target. Is it speed? Is it where you move, I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out. It's perplexing.
Yeah, no, it is. As you say, as you ponder it more, you kind of go, okay, is it where yellow sits on the visible spectrum in terms of what other prey might be able to see?
Right,
And
right.
so you kind of, it takes them slightly out on the peripheral of what they can see. Yeah.
Yeah. And they, it's what's interesting is they sit out in the open. We have lots of trees around us, but they sit out on a chair on our porch or on a wire on our porch. And you see other birds around them of much greater size. It doesn't seem to faze them. So I don't know. I'd love to have a talk with one of them.
My guess is maybe in the animal world, it's like, hey, I've evolutionary, I taste really bad or something, or you eat me and you're going to be sick or something like that. Yeah.
It could be. Yeah.
Maybe that yellow is a warning. Don't mess with this.
Okay. Now, building on that question, we have guests and listeners from all over the world. Where are you in the world and what can you see out your window?
Well, I am in the United States. I'm in the state of Virginia and I'm in the northern part of it in Arlington. And I am lucky enough to have a window to look out on the world every day as I do my work. And I look out on a wood, which is exactly the place where I saw that yellow finch. And it is a fantastic thing to see out the window, this wood, but also we have our yard in between it, maybe 20 meters between us and the edge of the wood. So we're in this transition zone, or as I like to think of it, this edge. And the nature comes into our more staid, flat, open area all the time. The deer come to rest. The deer bring their fawns and feel safe here for some reason. I'm not sure why with the big house here. The foxes play and bring their kits, and then they disappear back into the woods. So there's something not just about seeing the nature out the window, but feeling like you're on that edge and you're being invited to move back and forth between it. I love my view.
Maybe it's the yellow finches keeping guard and they go, safe. Yeah. There's something there that we don't know about. Yeah.
Yeah, or they're saying the weird guy who's got his nose pressed against the window, he'll protect us if we get in trouble.
Looks like Yoda. Yeah.
It's nothing like that in the UK, Larry. We see the occasional magpie and a fox go through the bins.
Yeah, this is a little more what you picture
from
the storybooks.
Larry, let's get into a few dinner party introductions. Obviously, I mentioned about your latest book, The Great Question and Art of the Ask, which we'll explore as we come through to the show today. But just for now, just questions to ease us in, which are a bit more akin to being at a dinner party, not your kind of, what are you doing? How are you today? We want to go a little bit deeper as we want to do. So I'm going to say, what's giving you joy at the moment?
The funny thing is that even though we'll talk about the book later, it's related to that I am right now getting the joy of the pause. And what I mean by that is a pause in the speed and logistics around writing and publishing the book. The book just came out 3 weeks ago. And the months leading up to that were just breakneck and crazy and unpredictable, even if you think they should be predictable. So to have a break from that pattern of the speed and logistic is something that I need. And then in a few weeks here, we're going to be doing some traveling to places we haven't been before. So it's a new adventure. So the combination of being able to pause and knowing I'm going to get that added refresh and a new adventure, those are giving me a lot of joy right now.
And is that just on that, is the travel, is that connected to the promotion and talking about the book? Or are you genuinely unplugging and getting away and saying, right, okay, or is it a bit of both? Or?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So my wife and I had this pattern over the last 5 years where we take an extended period of time, call it a month, and go someplace that isn't our home and isn't near our home to, as we say, live, play, and work, and try to do it in a different way. So this is really that kind of a trip, but we're also going to tag on to the end of it a chance to do a family trip with our 2 adult children. So yeah, and actually related to the book, I'm going to get to meet a whole bunch of people that I've never met in person, that I've only talked to over Zoom or some other form of communication. So that for me is really a thrill.
Now, what are you curious about right now, or what big question keeps coming back to you?
So I have both a question that keeps coming back to me and I guess I would say an observation. And the two are doing a little bit of a dance in my head. So I'm one of those people that when it comes to questions, I don't really think it's about the question. I think it's about the practice of questioning. It's not the words, it's not the punctuation. There's no perfect question. No question fits in every situation, no matter how great it is. But there's this one question that keeps coming back to me and giving me yield. And that question is, what will you realize soon that you already know? And I find that every time I think about it, I come at it some other way. And I know there's some answer to it that I haven't come across because, I mean, if you think about it, for all of us, I think there are things we already know that we don't even anticipate we're about to realize soon. And sometimes that's a great surprise. Sometimes it's oh my God, I really wasted all that time and I knew this from the beginning. It brings a whole range of paths back to me, not answers, not responses, but paths on where to go.
I caught sight of that question in the book and I did want to talk to it. And so I'm glad you brought it up. It's a real brain twister.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting here going, I've tuned out of the podcast. Yeah, I'm onto that. Yeah.
It's a double take question. You think you've got it, and then it sort of runs away from you. And I wondered do you have to put it in the context of something, a topic or a theme or a thing you are thinking about? Is that the idea? As you place it in the context of work or relationships or life more generally, and then you apply that question to that thing that's running around your head. Is that the idea of it? Or can you just let it play and see what emerges and something that you didn't expect in terms of the topic suddenly pops out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think that it's hard to pursue if you don't put it in context.
Okay.
But it doesn't come with any specified context. So I can let it be just playful, or I can let it be that mind worm, like an earworm that just, I'm trying to make heads or tails of what it might really mean. And that's where this other observation comes in that's playing around with the question in my head. And it's a comment that was made by somebody I interviewed for the book, Robin Klingler. She's the executive director of the World Peace Game. And the World Peace Game, for those who don't know it, is played by kids. Usually they're in the 9 to 11-year-old range. And they are given 50 interlocking real world problems that prohibit world peace, at least adults getting to it. And then they're pretty much left within the boundaries of the game to figure it all out on their own. And, the keys are turned over to them. And I won't go into that, but what they find as they work themselves through the problem is what her observation is. And that is, the game doesn't work without collective wisdom. And so I have popped her comment out of the World Peace Game and really tried to think about that observation, the game, whatever the game is, from the game of work to the game of the World Peace Game to the game of life, doesn't work without collective wisdom. So what does that really mean to me in any particular situation is something that I keep coming back to. And it kind of nicely links with the question. Maybe my answer to it is more often than not something I already know, and I just need to realize it sooner. So those are the two things you asked, and now you're in my soup up there.
No, I can see why you've been referred to as a mix of Solomon, Confucius, and who was it? Yoda. Like, I already feel like we just wrap up right there. We're done. Yeah.
Well, it either has your listeners leaning into the conversation or running for the hills. I'm not sure which, but
or doing that sort of Stan Laurel type scratching of the head. I mean, I do find that sometimes with decisions, which are, it is in effect a question in itself that you're having to answer. But and I hate it. I hate the fact when I come to a decision 6 weeks down the line and think, oh, that's what I thought right at the beginning. I knew that was the thing to do. Yeah. but you allow yourself to get drawn into stuff rather than maybe going inwards. Maybe it's listening to yourself at a different level. But anyway, we're going to go woo-woo here, Simon.
Oh,
I
good.
don't usually
My
go
favorite.
woo-woo.
Yeah. My favorite. Must be the late evening for you, John. Yeah.
It's, the coffee's kicking in. Imagine you're at this dinner party, Larry, and I wanted to introduce you to someone. And I said, hey, this is Larry. How would you introduce yourself? What are the, as it were, the intersections? What sits at the middle of your Venn diagram?
It's interesting because I've actually played with your question, asking myself that. What can I do when I walk into a room and somebody asks something like that, which they usually reduce to something more narrow, like, what do you do? And how could I generate a different conversation? So I answer that I focus on what makes us better. And then I try to nurture that. And I'll tell you the reason that I do that. So I could say, oh, I consult and advise companies and their leaders. Oh, I write. I speak and sit on boards. All those things are true, but they tell you absolutely nothing about me, because there are many other people who can collect all of those things together or some of those things together. And I don't know what you've learned. But you read at the beginning that my work focuses on this nexus, this crossover point of entrepreneurship, of creativity, of leadership, specifically leadership in uncertainty, and asking questions. And really, all those things, there are four things there that every one of us has. We all have the capacity for creativity, for asking questions, for leading each in our own way, and for being entrepreneurial. I don't mean starting a business. I mean taking an idea and trying to create value that you can then share with others. That's more how I think about entrepreneurship. Or the other way I think about entrepreneurship is the root definition is to undertake, and to undertake at such a level that you place yourself as a surety on the effort. You are willing to back it up because you believe in it so much to make this thing happen, to undertake until it happens. So every one of us has a version of all four of those things in us, but we're either wrongly told we don't, or we lack the skills to know how to get started to figure out what those things look like for each of us, how we can shape any one of them over time, and then most important, how we can put them together. And when we do those things that I said at the end there, that is what makes us better. Those are our natural abilities or capabilities that collectively make us better. And I say collectively referring to those four things because they influence one another. They intersect with one another. They're all better for the others.
I'm going to dive into our next question. I'm very much enjoying our dinner party. Have you got a to-ask list each and every day along with a to-do list? And if so, what might be on it?
Yeah. So no is the answer, but there's a little bit more to the answer. So I don't walk around with that list of questions in my head. More, I'll tell you what I walk around with. I walk around with it's something I borrowed from the poet Mary Oliver. And Mary Oliver labeled it Instructions for Living a Good Life. And she had three things: pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. And I just love what those generate in terms of a list of questions. Pay attention. How do I pay attention, right? Can I do that with smell, where I typically do it with sight? Can I do it with touch, where I typically would do it with hearing? I don't know. There are different ways to pay attention. Being astonished. Well, if you don't put yourself out there and be curious in new situations, that happens less often, but I think that you can make it happen more often. And tell about it can be all sorts of things. So for me, it's writing and sharing it that way. Sometimes it's in my speaking, and it's always up there in my head. And if it appropriately comes out in a conversation, I guess I'm telling about it then too. But in order to tell about anything, you have to have thought a little bit about what it was you were paying attention to that you saw. You have to have thought about, why did it astonish you? And, what difference does it make that it did, so that you can then articulate as you tell about it to someone else. So that's what I walk around in my head with, those instructions for living a good life. And heck, even if you come up with nothing that anybody else finds interesting, it's sure fun.
It's interesting, and I think we'll get to it a bit more later, but you seem to explore what it is to be human, and you find themes or topics that are what is inherently it means to be human, creativity or leadership of things and questions or whatever, and then, as you say, find a way to then dig into that, pay real attention to that and bring it out. And actually, I suspect you're astonished along the way as you go into these endeavors, aren't you? These books that you write that you go, well, I didn't expect that to emerge.
Oh, for sure. More than once.
In fact, I mean, that actually might lead us into the first question I wanted to ask about the book. And maybe you can just give us a kind of sort of insight into what the book's about, the new book, the Great Question book. But I'm curious as to what question you started out with at the beginning of that book. So something must have been a catalyst. And then I wonder if it changed as you started to go into that, because there was a very broad range of disciplines of people that you spoke to. I think it was like 120, 140 people, maybe?
Yeah.
Something of that nature.
140,
unbelievable sort of depth and breadth of people's thoughts that you drew upon. So, yeah, what question did you start out with? Did that change as you made your way through it?
So I typically find myself where questions ripple into other questions. But if there was a starting point, it was the pattern that I saw across the first three books. So the first book was about entrepreneurship, the second about creativity, and the third about leadership in uncertainty. And in every one of those topics individually, questions factored in as critically important. So just think about it. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, not just in any one moment, but having lasting impact, questions play a really important role, from the genesis of an original idea to how do you make that real to how do you continue to add value to it. Same for creatives. You got to be really good at questioning to turn your idea into actual tangible value that others can appreciate. And in leadership, if you're, especially in uncertainty, if you aren't well-versed in asking questions and encouraging questions in others, you are more likely to end up in a dead-end alley and in real trouble, in a deeply uncertain world. So I had seen that there was a pattern in each of those books individually, but every time I walked away from a book project, I thought, there's something more. There's something more to this question thing. And could I pull that topic away from specific applications, like very narrowly focusing on entrepreneurship or creativity or leadership, and see it in a larger sense? So the origin question was probably there, but the question that very quickly came after it was, how can I talk myself out of writing this book? I was really tired from the previous book. And I just believed that I could not have been the first to realize the value of questions. And therefore, somebody out there had written about it, not just books, but research, and delved into why questions are so powerful for us as human beings, no matter what the application was. So I actually spent 18 months trying to talk myself out of writing the book. And what I found, first of all, was that while there are a lot of books and papers out there that use the word question in their title or in their headers, a lot of those are not really about questions. And when they are about questions, they tend to be about questions in a particular application. What kinds of questions should you ask as a private investigator, as a journalist, as a teacher, as a business person, whatever it might be? But to step back and look at questions in the larger sense, what I realized was we don't know very much about questions. It's an ability we're born with. We are a questioning species. So I don't think we sit around and ponder it a lot. We just get to the application. And when I saw that trend, it certainly made me say, well, gosh, maybe I do have to research and further and write something here. But I'll tell you that the tipping point for me, and this moves a little bit away from what questions started the book, it was an observation. And it was an observation made over the past 25 years that if you think about it, and if you look globally, there has been an increasing trend away from questions and much more towards statements or questions that aren't really questions. In fact, sometimes they're statements with a question mark at the end, or they're meant to reaffirm something that we already believe. They're not really meant to delve in. So those were the questions in a chain together that pushed me into the book and into writing it, as did that feeling that we all know when we hear a great question asked, or we ask one ourselves and we watch another person or a group respond to it. I wanted to know more about that feeling and where it came from. And frankly, all of that not only led to jumping into this book, but when I did these interviews with people, across the spectrum in terms of what they do professionally, artists and educators and neuroscientists and blah, 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 on and on. The very first question I asked every one of them was, what is a question? Because I don't think that's the kind of thing that we really sit down and think about. And the answers were fascinating, primarily because it was quite clear nobody had ever asked these individuals that question. And yet, somewhere inside them, consciously or unconsciously, they'd been ruminating on it. And they knew immediately where they wanted to go with their answers, which, by the way, were really a pattern of 4 themes that kept coming up when people would answer that question. But this is the most interesting thing. None of them knew me. None of them knew what my project would become, because even I was still figuring that out. Most of these were cold calls. I didn't know these individuals. And so when I asked them as the first question, what is a question? The shocking thing, the wonderfully surprising thing, was they all went big. They didn't think of questions as something small, even as small as, oh, well, that's how you get to an answer. They didn't think about questions that I think of as functional questions. What's for dinner? What's the best route to get to this destination I'm driving to? Whatever that means. They went to the larger end of the spectrum and the power and importance of potential of questions. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And I think pointing deeply to what you said earlier, John, this is a very human thing. And I think they could relate to it very much at that level.
It is what struck me. It was up there with, as if you'd said, what is the meaning of life? They were sort of, wow.
He goes in big, this guy. Yeah, he goes in big.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's it was fascinating to see, as you say, the pattern that played out after story of each of the interviewees, all very different as well. How
totally
far they
different.
took it. An invitation was one, to connect was another. It was as a means of generating empathy with other people. I mean, it went everywhere.
Yeah, I'm glad those things stood out to you too, because so the 4 things, just so listeners can play with them too, is
yes.
The first pattern in answering the question, what is a question, was an invitation to understanding. So really, questions go nowhere if we don't feel like we're invited to ask. And if we are invited to ask in such a way that, there's a desire to understand on both ends, even if we invite ourselves that way, those are the most powerful questions. So an invitation to understanding. The second was a question is a frame, because whatever you ask is going to frame wherever the conversation goes next. Doesn't mean the frame doesn't change across the conversation, but the question really drives that. The third was a question is a behavior. It's fundamental to how humans operate. And it's not just our habits and our patterns over time. It's how our brains are built. Brains want to grow. Brains do their best work in uncertainty when they're dealing with something that they haven't worked on before. Brains want to discover. Brains want to innovate. Questions drive all of that. And the fourth thing was questions are key to who we are. Those were the 4 things that drove people. But there is empathy within those. There is connection. So the things you were feeling as you read about what these answers were are absolutely true as well. They just rolled up to these 4 larger answers to what is a question.
I think that goes back to that piece you said before around pay attention and be astonished, because I think when you ask that, what is a question, if you're paying attention and being astonished, that's almost like the unwritten piece which sits below that, which then lets you ask that big question at the beginning. And if you've been living those behaviors, if that's the right way to say it, or living that curiosity,
yes.
All of a sudden you go, well, I've actually got something to say back to you. So I think that's that lovely loop of how you might get up and move through the day, which I would say paying attention and being astonished is your way of being, rather than a 5-point framework. And therefore, if you're in that state, when you ask that question, they go, "Oh wow, I'm ready to I'm ready to rumble with that because I have been paying attention and I am astonished by what I'm seeing, and here's my answer." So maybe another little Venn diagram sits in that space somewhere.
Yes. And I love that you framed it as a path through the day. So let's take the idea of being astonished. And when we tie it to questions, our default too often is, what question can I ask that will be astonishing? What a bullshit way to go about it. Because maybe you get lucky and you do ask that kind of question. It's more likely that you're entertaining, but you're not really inviting astonishment. It's more how you're going through the day and being open to that idea of being astonished, being open to the idea that it could be anything in the path of your day that might astonish you. It might not even be something that you generate or the environment generates, but the people that you talk to and exchange questions with, they generate, and you might not even know what to expect that to be. So what I love about your description of living it and across a span of however many hours we're awake in a day is that you're just allowing yourself to go through that day open to the possibility of being astonished. There are plenty of things in this world to astonish us every day. We're not going to run into the over-the-top stuff every single day, but if you're in that pattern, you see those astonishing things more often, just as you see opportunities more often, ideas more often. This is an overlay with curiosity.
Yeah, there's always a yellow finch somewhere if you're open to it.
Yeah,
that might be the right way to think about it.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to use that phrase. It's not like the yellow finches just suddenly appeared, but suddenly in the last day or two, I allowed myself to be astonished by it.
The question off the back of that, Larry, is that philosophers are cited as paying attention. I remember when we spoke to Julian Bergini, How to Think Like a Philosopher. That was the first chapter, was pay attention. And that's been repeated consistently with the people we've talked to. You've got to be closely observing, starts with an observation, an openness or whatever. And I know that you talk around in the book around noticing. And so I was taken by that, which I'm assuming is akin to this idea of paying attention, that close observation. Can you elaborate on that a little? I know it's one element within the book, but it caught my eye.
It's a really important one, and it actually is emphasized in 2 of the other books that I've written. And the distinction I like to make is between noticing and the practiced noticer. So I think we all notice at some level, and as you referred to things that we see, I think noticers of all kinds do discover. But those who are practice noticers seem to see far more than things. In fact, so this is an interesting pattern I found in the science around questions, such that it exists. The pattern around the science says that we're actually born, there are 2 parts to this. The first part is we're born questioning. So even before we acquire language, we are asking, how do we get food? How do we get shelter? How do we feel safety? How do we find a place to play? Who can we trust? And so on, before we can even utter those words. But there's another pattern in the research around questions, and that is questions are how we see into the future, and into a future that doesn't exist now and may be built out of things that also don't exist right now. So I think those practice noticers, they see things around them all the time. They also see ideas and patterns and things that aren't things around them all the time. And it's the accumulation of that practice that causes them to wonder, to be curious, to ask questions about what else might be out there or what could be out there that isn't there right now. And so they're really leaning into that second pattern and that second strength of our natural questioning capacity and habit. And that is to think forward into the future. So I think this noticing idea is not only really, really powerful, it's very accessible to anyone. And when it's turned into a practice of noticing, it turns around some pretty cool things. This is another thing that I just want to point out. When we get into the area of noticing, this is something I talked about in one of my other books. part of what we enjoy about noticing is that astonishment when we come across something that's surprising to us. Could be little astonishment, could be off the charts astonishment. When people talk about noticing, they also talk about where breakthrough ideas come from. And that's, I think, the practice noticer who's more likely to generate those things. And here's where I think we get it. The next part is where we get a little off the rails. This belief that a breakthrough idea has to be something that is so far out there, so removed from where we are now as to change the world. Unfortunately, breakthrough ideas like that, we only see that in hindsight. They appear in workman's clothes first. They don't appear in a tuxedo. And it reminds me of one of the interviews that I did with a guy named Stuart Kauffman, who's a MacArthur Fellow. He's a chaos theorist. He's a researcher and so on. And he has this concept that you all may be familiar with. It's called the adjacent possible. And I love this idea of the adjacent possible because it comes from noticing, but it also reminds us that these amazing things that could be are really adjacent to where we are right now. And they're in this realm of the possible that is just a little bit out of what we know and what we do and who we are right now. It's like just putting your toe over the line. And I'll tell you what's wonderful about his theory is that if you're in the practice of just putting your toe just that much out of the space that you know so well and that you occupy every day, you can't help but see something new every time you do it. May not be astonishing, but in accumulation, you're going to see new things. That's one power of the adjacent possible. Going there, you're going to see new things. The second part of the power, and there are three, second part is when you come back to the worlds you know, you can't help but see it differently because you've encountered something new. And the third part is the most powerful. The more you put your toe over the line into what's adjacent, the more you expand the possible in your current world. So that practice, like the practice of noticing, actually increases the number of opportunities for everything from good luck to great ideas to being astonished. I think it's such a cool concept.
I think it is. I mean, again, Simon can see I'm getting all sort of excited because I get a chance to talk about a philosopher again. I'm minded of Plato's cave. I mean, this is, as they step out, having thought that reality was shadows on the wall, and then they go outside and they see reality, and they stick their head outside the cave, and then they come back in. But it's changed. It's changed their perception of what reality really is, or what, as you might say, what's possible. So, I like this. I think that the noticing was something that caught my eye as well, Simon, and this is coming to you, because there's a couple of references in the book where it talks about something you've explored, which is looking at pieces of art and noticing and getting people to look closely and pay attention to works of art. And they suddenly become practice noticers, as Larry might say.
That art of slow looking, isn't it? Like the ability to slow down.
Slow looking, that was it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Again, because I talk about this, I'm doing an around here. Like I used to be a lecturer at the National Gallery of England in the UK. So I was paid to give talks on these artworks when I knew John. So, and when I first went there, I just thought, everything here is so incredibly boring because I'm an abstract artist. So I was always interested in, more Jackson Pollock rather than a Rodin or a Michelangelo or something. But what I realized is I just wasn't looking hard enough and I was looking in the wrong way. And then once I started to learn to look, you realize there's these amazing stories and you move past your own biases and filters and you go, well, hang on, I've just been looking in the wrong way. So now I've been doing a keynote recently and the talk is, it's all about curiosity, but our avenue into that is 3 different artworks and people love it. Like the best feedback I've ever had from a keynote is doing this. So, but that part of that is around, look, we're just going to learn to look slowly and learn to see what we see and what are we not seeing? What does that do? And the heavy lifting. And the flip side of that is you only take 7 seconds. What I read the other day, most of us go through a gallery or could be life or whatever it may be. And we only look at something for 5 to 7 seconds and mosey on. So when you stop and pause, even if it's only for 15 seconds, you're doubling that input you take in. So I'm not sure if that's a statement or a question or yeah, where I was, but that's the context of that. Yeah.
Ooh, I think, yeah, it's this wonderful possibility. And I was going to ask you, and then you just did it, to define slow looking, because I know what it is, but I don't know that everybody does. But you gave a very simple definition of it. And sometimes it's just taking more time. There are things you can do in that time that really bring you in touch with the art or whatever you're looking at in a different way. Actually, one of the people I interviewed, her name is Claire Bown. She's the author of The Art Engager, and it's about concepts like slow looking. And she has a business that she calls Thinking Museum, and actually works with people in galleries, the faculty and the staff and the docents and the people who engage with the people who visit the museum, to teach them things like this, so that they not only spend a little more time in the art, but they get more from it. And it is an immediate practice in noticing. And if you can do it with a piece of art that is, in most cases, completely unfamiliar to you, you can do it with anything. Think about doing it with the things you already know in your own world. And I love, too, that concept, at least part of it, came from the Project Zero work at Harvard University, which they've been working on now. Gosh, I think this is 6 decades now, maybe even more than that, where they put a lot of those tools like slow looking out there and generally available to anybody. So that, I think it's projectzero.org, but the Project Zero website is a great, great resource to learn more about things like slow looking and other things that help you to notice.
And do you think with this, in the work you do in organizations where let's say in front of that artwork, where you give people permission to look slowly and also take in things they don't understand initially and be okay with that, is that part of that environment we need to be creating in organizations, like around that ability to stop, be curious, and look slowly? And given you work in the leadership space, how does that all start to, what are those signals that need to be sent, or what does that look like?
So it's a really interesting question. And I think a great starting point is that for whatever the reasons are, a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations don't want to go there, in a similar way that they don't want to invite questions to be asked. And I think what's so interesting about that is that asking a question is just going there. It's not saying you're going to make a change. It's not saying you should make a change or that anything is wrong. It's just going there. It's allowing yourself to go into a space, if nothing else, where you check in again with your assumptions. Which ones are still relevant? Are they relevant in the same ways? Are there new ones that have come up? What other ideas are out there that you could borrow from or adopt from? So it's just going there. And one of the ways that I find that leaders come around is to stop looking at their own space, their own organization, their own job, and saying, should I do that here or should I not? Should I allow more noticing? Should I allow more questioning or should I not? And instead say, what does that do in some of the most difficult spaces, in places where you wouldn't think it would create value, that it would violate the rules of doing a good job? And one of the things that I write about in the book is how art is being used to train medical students. So they've come out of their actual studies and they are now about to go into their rotations and being a doctor on your own. And there's a program out of the Center for Brain Health in Dallas, Texas, that uses art with these medical students. They bring the medical students to the gallery so they can diagnose the art. And in doing so, they're learning about themselves and about where patients are coming from, because the art, diagnosing a piece of art, is so foreign to what their studies are. But it allows them to go into spaces that aren't foreign. What do they see in the art? What do they know about the person who painted it? Do they know anything about the time in which it was painted? Why is it sitting next to the painting that's on the right and the sculpture that's on the left? Who made that decision? All of those things suddenly open you up to this bigger understanding before you begin your diagnosis. And the translation into what that means with human patients is not only powerful, it's directly applicable. So if it's working for these medical students, if it's making them, putting them in a position where they can give better care and they can relate to their patients better, and healing rates and survival rates go up, it makes me think that any organization in any business can benefit from that. So that's kind of how I think about the getting started, is maybe look somewhere else where it really is having an impact. And this program has been active for a decade now, spread across the US and into Europe as well.
Larry, I just want to take us in a slightly different direction off the back of that
Please.
Exploration around noticing. And again, really, we could do a 10-hour podcast. I've got so many elements. I mean,
after the first hour, it would just be the three of us.
But I thought, oh my gosh, it's like I've discovered the Holy Grail, like, in Indiana Jones or something. This is it. This is it. It was the piece about intellectual humility. And the reason I wanted to pick up on that was something that really triggered this whole podcast for me, actually. And we've talked about it many times, was that the curiosity needed to be married with humility. I hadn't called it intellectual humility, but I then subsequently know that is a terminology that actually captures it much better. And so, can you elaborate on intellectual humility? And again, you make a nice reference and tie into The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. So could you just talk to that for a moment? Because that's really interesting for me.
Sure. Let me come at it from a couple of angles. The hero's journey, at least the part of the hero's journey that Hollywood borrows, leaves significant parts out. And those parts tend to be the failures, the intransigence of the hero to move away from things that even when they learn they're bad for them, they just keep doing it. Also the cyclicality of the hero's journey, that you keep repeating this process of learning new things and having to humble yourself in order to advance. So that's why the reference is there. The chapter that talks about that in the book really began as a chapter about listening, because listening is absolutely critical to asking questions. If you are not asking to truly hear something back, and hopefully something that will change you in some way, even if it's just to change your next question, then you're not really listening. Being silent is not an equivalent of listening. Hearing somebody and just parroting their words back, slight bit better, but really it's not listening. So the further I delved into listening, what became very clear is that in order to listen in the powerful way that we know we can, you have to be intellectually humble. So the definition of intellectual humility is to embrace the idea that, first of all, you don't know everything and you never will. But secondly, that what you know might actually be wrong or incomplete. And then the third level in intellectual humility is to embrace that idea that you might have to change based on what you learn coming back to you. So none of that says you're going to do those things. None of it says how you're wrong is going to be identified. None of it says that you're going to have to make a change, right? They are not part and parcel of being intellectually humble. You're just considering these things that maybe you've closed yourself off to or you've never been exposed to before. So that's one way that I would place intellectual humility. But the second thing that's really important is to distinguish it from humility in general. So humility in general, the way one of the people I interviewed put it is, humility involves an ability to see your current limitations. So humility, when we think about our current limitations, we think more narrowly about, oh my God, I'm going to have to acknowledge that I was wrong or I don't know everything. That embarrasses me. So I want to avoid that. When you avoid that, you cannot possibly be intellectually humble. But that's not the kind of humility we're talking about here. Intellectual humility focuses on things like knowledge, beliefs, intelligence. These are things that take time to develop. These are things that continue to evolve. These are things that really, in some respects, are open. I mean, your beliefs might be a little tighter, but they're still open. So if you think about being intellectually humble as working on those bigger things, increasing your knowledge, becoming more in tune with your beliefs and your understanding around them, expanding your intelligence, suddenly you're in a different category. Suddenly you can listen in a different way. Suddenly you can acknowledge what you don't know without all the penalties of this moment and it being called a limitation. So I think that that's really what intellectual humility is, and it allows you to listen in a different way. Okay, So hopefully that description is clear. But let's move to, okay, well, what the hell do I do with that? How do I start to practice being more intellectually humble? And several of the people that I interviewed crystallized it to call it their mantra, and each of their mantras were different. And I'll just give you a couple of those because I think that any one of us and any listener can play around with this. I'll start by asking the question in each case. How do you become more intellectually humble? Caitlin Chusey, who is in charge of biomimicry and strategy and big data at Microsoft, okay, which sounds like she's going to be in our stereotype versus something else. Her mantra to herself is simply quieting my cleverness. It's an act of intellectual humility. It's not getting rid of her cleverness. It's not never applying her cleverness. It's not allowing her cleverness to be part of the mix. It's quieting it enough to see how other people are clever, how she might become more clever, whatever you want to call it. That's one way, just by thinking that mantra thought, that I think you can practice this idea of intellectual humility. I'll give you two more. Jim Lampley, who was a very well-known broadcaster, especially in boxing in the days around Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and so on. He's now a communications professor at the University of North Carolina. He says one of the best ways to practice being intellectually humble, and remember, he comes from a journalism background that's all about asking questions and getting to an answer and writing a story. He talks about listening atmospherically. Can you listen in a way that takes in more than what you've just asked in a question? Can you listen in a way that takes in more than what you already have in your head, even what the person you're talking to has in theirs? Can you listen to the context around you? Can you listen to the different kind of connections that are happening in an exchange like that? Can you listen atmospherically? And if you do, you're already practicing intellectual humility because you're opening up to a bigger perspective. And the last little mantra for practicing intellectual humility that I love comes from another academic, Abe Abusharaf, who teaches strategy and communications and journalism at Northwestern University. He talks about decolonizing our thinking. And what he means by that is we really don't have an awareness of how quickly we take what we know, we take what we do, we take what we believe, and put a boundary around that, and then see everything else through that filter. We create a colony around our thoughts and our knowledge and our way of doing. If we can decolonize our thinking long enough to see that there are other worlds around us, that's how we usually see those breakthrough ideas. That's how we're astonished. It's also how we become intellectually humble. So all three of these things are things you can play with on your own. You know, if you're concerned about that embarrassment of being intellectually humble, these are ways to practice doing it without announcing it to anybody else. And I think they're super powerful ways to get into the weeds and understand intellectual humility a bit more than the definition.
I have to say, Larry, as you're saying that, I often listen atmospherically to my wife. It's usually quite frosty atmosphere. Certainly if it's something to do with who's doing what tasks in the house and or kids and or family chores. I'm getting very adept at it.
I love it.
I think that's a really nice piece there as well, because often when let's say if you would do the same if you're working on an innovation project and you need to be connecting with the people who are part of that challenge you're trying to solve it for. And often I'll talk around, warm data and cold data. Like you can have all the data on a spreadsheet in front of you, but that warm data, which I say is so important, is when you're talking to people and you're picking up on that atmosphere around that conversation rather than just someone going, yes, I like it. Like the really simple answer I always give, if someone says, yes, I like it, but they're shaking their head at the same time in a no, then you go, okay, the atmosphere around your response is different to the response. So you pick up on that sensing and that sense making and understanding that, and I'm not a data scientist, but what you may see in front of you, we take as granted once you are out in the field, if that's the right way to say it, being intellectually curious and intellectually humble, you then go, there's a lot more here that I might have picked up on first. Would that ring true?
Yes. Oh, it absolutely rings true. And it's interesting. I was in another conversation today with a brilliant innovator and entrepreneur who, she started numerous tech ventures of her own and grew them and sold them successfully. And then in the last 5 years, she spent a lot of time working on how do we solve the problem around data centers, just to come right back to your reference point about the data points out there. And we have a lot more of them these days. She was hired by Microsoft to not only think about data centers and how we might solve the problem, but to think about them differently. And here's what she did. This is just one example that I love. A lot of the talk around data centers is how do we present them in the way that a community will accept them? Because right now, communities don't want data centers. They're big, they're sprawling, they're loud, they use a lot of water and so on. And so every bit of the atmosphere around that is how do we lessen the negatives? Or how do we sweeten the deal by throwing a carrot in front of the community? And Joanne flipped that idea around and said, what if it was the case that the communities were coming to us asking for the data centers? What would make them do that? And so suddenly, just by asking the question that way, you've completely changed the atmosphere around you from, lessening negatives to how could we lean into positives that have them knocking on our door.
So Larry, last question. There's two more I can ask, but I'm going to have to choose one. And I can't tell you, with someone who has gone into this topic around questions and what they mean, how difficult I found it to craft some questions for you. I thought were going to be great questions. I wanted to create great questions. So I don't know, hopefully we've gone some of the way towards it. But
I have loved the questions so far. You're on a good track.
You're very kind. You talk about, or one of the things that emerges from the book is this idea of mattering. You talk about meaning, you talk about mattering, which takes it to a different place. So right back at you, why does this book matter to you? What impact do you hope it's going to have? I know that's potentially a challenging question, but yeah.
Yeah, it's in my own head, it's an, oh, wow. Why does this matter to me? Because my mind could easily go to all the specific answers to that. But I'll tell you, it matters most to me because it's a topic that guides us to what matters to any of us. How we get to understanding what matters to us can almost only come through a practice of asking. So not just a particular question, not just questions now and then, but ongoing asking. And part of that is, we live different stories across our lives. We live a story in a certain moment in certain conditions, surrounded by certain people and circumstances and all that. And we tend to think narrowly in terms of that one story, which sometimes defines how we think things matter to us or what matters to us. But really, our lives are these collections of stories. I think of it as a narrative arc. So the stories that happened before connect to the one that is happening to us now, will connect to the stories in the future, which we have a hand in creating. And that's just our arc. It intersects constantly with other people and their stories and their arcs and so on and so forth. So the mattering really comes out of a collection of all of that, our own personal narrative arc, and then the collective narrative arcs of the people in our communities, whatever that means, from our family to something bigger than that. How we get at that is by asking questions, but what we're in search of is understanding why we matter. What are we here for in the first place? And I don't think that it's really about coming up with a conclusion in your 50s that's going to carry you into your 90s. It's about continuing to engage that question of why we matter by engaging other questions. That's where mattering comes into this in a big way. And it was shocking in a positive way how many people use that word, not meaning, not reward, not anything else, but how often they use the word mattering.
And I said that I had two questions. I'm not going to ask it, but I think I touched on it earlier. There was a moment in the book when I was reading through it, I was going, yeah, this is great, this is great, this is great. But I genuinely had a light bulb, but a mic drop moment. And it was this idea of, this is about what it means to be human. And I touched on that earlier. And I just thought, oh, wow. I got to like page 250. Oh, wow. This is so much bigger than I could have imagined it was. And I wonder if that revealed itself to you again, almost similar to a question I asked earlier. Did that idea that this was about how to authentically express yourself as a human came to you as you went through the process? Or were you seeking that in the first place? Again, I don't know if I'm asking a horribly complicated question here or off-kilter question.
No. I think it's the perfect question. And the answer, and you gave me branches, you gave me options there, is yes to all of that. So you all can relate to this very well. When you do a book on entrepreneurship or you do a book on creativity, you're talking about curiosity.
Yeah.
You're just talking about different ways that you tap it and it plays out and you integrate it with other people and how they're curious. I think the same is true of leadership and uncertainty. You're curious about either how you're going to navigate troubling waters or how you're going to take advantage of new opportunities that have come forth. So in delving into those topics, it became very clear that we were talking about what it means to be human, not in the massive philosophical sense of, oh, let me give you one statement and that's what it means to be human, right? But in the sense of that is kind of the cue for our exploration over our lives as humans. So there was a part of me that said, I know it's about that. There was also a part of me that said, if I club people with that in the first chapter or even the first 3 or 4 chapters, I'm going to lose them. If I tie it to something that they know and that they can engage with easily, asking a question, then I can move them along in this journey to where they realize at page 200 or something else, oh my God, this is about what it means to be human. This is what it means to be part of a questioning species. So there was that thought too. And then there was the third, I've expanded it to 3 now, but the third thought was, even with that knowledge of this existence of that this was about what it means to be human, even with that knowledge that I was going to delay almost stating it out loud, I was still surprised by exactly what it said, what questions said about what it means to be human. I was surprised at how vital they are to what it means to be human. And I was even surprised by how they help us to discover what it means to be human and what it means to matter. Even though I had inklings, I was absolutely surprised by it. I hope I continue to be surprised.
Well, I would say job done, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Larry, it's time for a thought experiment. I know someone who is pretty much a philosopher, really, yourself, would know about these. They're ways that philosophers explored profound ideas. And so we have a thought experiment for you today based on the game Jeopardy.
Ah, okay.
Well, because, you're great at questions. You're great at great questions. So we're going to give you some answers and you've got to tell us what you think the question being asked is. Yeah? You've watched this, haven't you? We don't get it in the UK. Do you get it in Australia, Simon? I don't know. Do you get Jeopardy?
Not now, but once upon a time, yeah, it would have been, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. So, but Larry knows it. So I'll give you an answer, Larry, and you have to then say what you think the question might be. So here we go.
Oh, all right. I'll do my best.
Okay, well, that's an easy one to start. 26.2 miles.
What is a marathon?
It's close, but it's how far does Simon have to walk to get to his nearest shop?
Oh, wow. You could run, Simon.
I could. Often that will be how I go get milk in the morning. Yeah.
It's not a promising start, Larry, but come on. We'll build from here. Don't worry.
I love it.
Okay. The next one is Isaac Newton.
Who shouldn't rest under apple trees?
Close, but it's actually who invented the apple.
See, if you'd said Steve Jobs, what would I have said? God.
Next one is Chewbacca. What is the question?
Who's actually the smartest character in Star Wars?
Oh, I like that as a question. Sorry, but it's actually, what's my nickname?
Okay, we'll go to something. This one should be easier. Frodo Baggins. Speaking of hero's journey, Frodo Baggins.
Who loved getting out of the Shire?
That could be correct, but the real answer we're looking for is, what did Mr. and Mrs. Baggins call their eldest son? Frodo Baggins. I would have thought that one was a little bit more
really
obvious,
elicits a lot of other questions.
Larry, for someone whose whole book is about questions,
written a book on questions. So,
come on, pick it up.
This is why I emphasize the practice, because there's always room for improvement.
Come on, let's see. Right, this next one, Hogwarts. You're taking this far too seriously.
Gosh, yeah.
Deep intellectual humility here.
I know. I could have to edit this down, aren't I?
Gosh, what crazy thought happened in J.K. Rowling's head to name the school the way she named it?
I like that, but unfortunately it's wrong.
I like that.
It's what painful ailment is Simon currently treating with an ointment?
A little bit perturbed that John brought that up, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay.
Yeah, just if you could put the ointment in the show notes, it's good to have as a reference for first aid.
And some photos, yeah.
Yeah.
And some photos as well. Okay.
What, before and after?
Yeah. Before and after Hogwarts.
Well, or if there are dots, they could be connected.
There's plenty of dots.
Last 2 more to go.
Okay, all right. Keir Starmer.
What? Say that again?
Keir Starmer.
You don't even know who he is, do you?
No, I don't. I don't.
He's our exiting Prime Minister, Larry.
Oh, yes. Well, you turn them over so quickly that it's hard to keep track.
Good answer.
The whole world's talking about this, John. Yeah.
I think that deserves a point without having to revert to actually providing a question there, Larry. So well done there. That was a point. But there was a question there, though. Simon, do you want to share what that question was for Keir Starmer?
The question is, who has just opened their own window cleaning business to generate some money after losing his job?
Yeah, that sounds wise. Probably not going to get another job in politics quickly.
And the last answer is Justin Bieber. What is the question?
Who is most likely to have run out of space on his body for a new tattoo?
That's good.
That's very close.
When you said who is most likely, I was getting slightly excited there because the actual question is...
I thought he's got it.
I did as well. Who is most likely to replace Keir Starmer as Prime Minister of the UK?
And have the same length of term.
Well, they're looking to break the cycle with somewhere
slightly more popular, maybe. I don't know. Depends if we get.
Yeah, sings when he gets into trouble. Like, it could work.
And there we have our own version of Jeopardy.
I love it. I love going into those zones.
Okay, we're going to finish up with a rapid fire round. So, first question, we are continually building the Occupational Philosophers manifesto. What one thing of all of your learning should we add?
I'm going to give you something that I just learned in the last few weeks that ties to everything I learned. And Tina Seelig gets the credit for this. She's a professor at Stanford. This is what she says. There's a prize in every room. Find it.
Ooh.
I love it.
Yeah, that is good, isn't it?
I'm just quickly writing this down. So
that's why we've gone silent. Let's give it. My gosh, we need to get T-shirts and mugs with that on. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Mic drop. Okay.
Larry, what books or films do you think we should be reading, watching right now? Obviously, aside to your own book, clearly we need to be reading that. And it goes without saying, I would heartily recommend this. It really does open one's eyes to this topic, which might have been glossed over, but has such depth to it. But outside of that, what books or films do you fancy sharing with us that we should be taking an interest in?
Yeah, so since you covered books, I'll go to film. I watched 2 films recently. One is I guess you could say a biopic, a story about somebody but played by other characters. And then there's a documentary that goes with it. That film is Temple Grandin. And if you don't know who Temple Grandin is, boy, she is worth looking up. I mean, she's known as somebody who has extreme autism, but how she has worked with that and what she has done in her life is amazing. So I watched the film first, and then there is a documentary on her called An Open Door that is not only worth watching, it's worth watching after the film to see how the two line up, but just to know who this person is, how they navigated life. Fantastic.
Now, cast your mind forward many, 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 many years. And let's say it's come to that time of your life where you've decided, hey, I want to, maybe slow down a little bit. And you've decided to move to a retirement home. Now, you're taken into the retirement home. The door opens, the nurse introduces you to everyone else. How would you like to be introduced? Here's Larry. Boom.
Yeah. How would I like to be introduced? This is a guy who makes time for you.
Oh, you're like the nicest guy in the world with that. Like, you're going to have so many friends. Yeah.
I mean, I hope I have friends, but...
Well, you certainly will have after that. That sounds like... But Irene and Doris got very excited.
I mean, isn't it cool to discover people? That's what I hope people feel as I'm busy trying to discover them with all my questions, including the annoying ones.
Lovely. Lovely stuff.
Now, I want to jump in here. On this piece around questions. I went to an event, and they have these all over the world, called Creative Mornings. And it's that early morning catch up, and they have a theme, and the same theme goes all around the world. And I went to one of these last Friday morning. So 8:30, you kick off till 10. What I just loved, the audience, they just asked so many good questions when you met them. Often you go to these networking type events and you think, come on, I've asked you 25 questions here and I haven't heard anything back. This isn't a conversation, or it's just so hard to break into a little huddle and you think, terrible. But these Creative Mornings, everyone was, the conversation was so easy. So I love that bit. Everyone did that. Just made a bit of time. They were genuinely curious around, hey, what's going on in your world? And as such, you arrived there, you felt good, the energy was good, and it created that buzz in the room around that piece. So I just thought that making time, and without even maybe meaning to, just being curious around other people. So I just want to make a call out to that Creative Mornings, and just if there's one near you, I think it's a really nice thing and a nice way to reflect how these gatherings could take place.
I have heard of those. I've never participated in one, but the thing I've always wondered is, just by the name alone, do people come in with a different mindset?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
So they're almost like primed to go wherever it takes them. And then if that's true, how easy is that? And it just makes you think, how many other places we could be doing it, should be doing it.
Yeah, I love it. Come prime. Now, just to wrap us up, what are you up to next? Is there something on the horizon other than a good holiday and a break? But what else? What are you up to next?
Yeah, really, for me, since the book just came out 3 weeks ago, this is like the whole new life that comes after writing a book and having it published, is sharing it. And it's not only the challenge and the opportunity in trying to get it as many places as possible, but the learning that comes back from it is unbelievable. Every one of my books, what people have taken from it has overlapped with some of what I expected, but surprised me in the most unimaginable ways. And so that's kind of what I'm taken up with. How many places can I put myself that I can maximize that return of whatever that learning is? And the key rule that I learned years ago for how you do that, how you entering what they call this marketing and promotion phase, is if it's fun, do it. And if it's not fun, you should probably run for the hills. And it's panned out.
I love it.
A follow-up to that, Larry, is what book then are you trying to convince yourself not to write next?
Well, I do have one in my head.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. You can't stop it, can you?
And I keep trying to push it to the side. But you see all around that it needs a different kind of exploration, and it would be a book about trust.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I knew you'd have something bubbling up.
Yeah, of course. We we could have worked that one out without even asking. So where can we find you, connect with you? Where do you hang out online? Where's the best place for people to find the book, say hello, whatever that may be?
Sure. If you want to learn about me, my books, my articles, consulting, speaking, all of that, my website starts with my initials, LR, lrspeaks.com. That is the central location, and it's set up to learn quickly. Instead of just bombarding you, you can go where you want to go. If you're interested in my ongoing post day-to-day, I do that mainly on LinkedIn. So check me out there as well.
Well, look, I think we ought to wrap it up then. Larry, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And, we've kept you way longer than probably you expected, but you've been a very gracious and delightful and insightful guest. So thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
I have totally enjoyed it. And thank you for the opportunity. This is probably the most internationally, geographically spread interview I have ever had. And I love it.
Yeah, our time
I think there's something to it.
Skew if, aren't they, on this? Yeah.
I thought for a minute you were going to say this is the best podcast I've ever been on.
No, I thought that, John.
That
he
is
took
exactly
us up
what
and
I was
then
going
he
to say.
said geographically. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Larry.
The most geographically spread.
But she made me so nervous in the Jeopardy game that I was, I shifted off that answer and went to something else.
That is going on our promo posters. The most geographically spread podcast
I've ever been on.
Oh, dear. Larry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Total pleasure for me too. Thank you for having me.